Good evening. Welcome to the Grand Blanc Township Board of Trustees meeting for Thursday, June 11th. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Mr. Guzak, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to ask for an approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, I would be glad to approve the consent agenda and the agenda as presented tonight.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
I would like to add something to the agenda.
I thought we were going to try and avoid adding things to the agenda at the last minute.
No, I would like
Unless
to
it was
add
an
something
emergency.
to the agenda. So what?
I thought we were going to avoid doing that unless it was an emergency.
This is an emergency.
Okay. What is it?
Okay. Racism in the Township Police Department and racist lawsuit filed against the Township Police Department.
Okay, I think, Mr. Limita, are we prepared to, or Mr. Laddie probably, what's your thoughts on that, Mr. Laddie, in terms of discussing any pending lawsuits or litigation?
I forwarded to the township complaints that were currently pending, one in Grand Blanc District Court and one in federal court. And we haven't, normally when we talk about lawsuits, you're going to get attorney-client privilege, you're going to have advice from counsel. We would do that in a closed session. But what you have before you, or at least in the email that I sent, were just two complaints. And so if we're going to have a discussion about those complaints and it's going to lead to some sort of legal strategy or consideration of legal advice, then I'd suggest you do that in closed session. If it's not going to have to do with strategy or legal advice, then you don't need to have a closed session necessarily. And by the way, insurance counsel representing the township on both of those cases, and my office is not.
Legal matter.
Mr. Massey, I'm sorry? Go ahead.
We just want to have a discussion about the racism.
About these lawsuits, or I'm not following you, Mr. Massey?
We want to have a discussion about racism in the Township Police Department and the racist lawsuit filed against the Township Police Department.
Mr. Thomas?
I would like to support Mr. Massey putting the cases, not the cases on the agenda, but not to get into legal strategy on how to defend the cases.
I didn't follow it, Mr. Thomas. You would like to have what put on the agenda?
I said I will support Mr. Massey and have him put on the agenda, but not a strategy section for the lawsuits.
So I'm not sure what we want to discuss. The lawsuits themselves?
I believe the lawsuits and how they were brought to the board.
Okay. Is that in agreement with you, Mr. Massey? Is that what you're looking at, or?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure it requires an agenda item, but Mr. Laddie, would you be prepared to discuss how they were brought to the board?
Sure.
In your report? Okay.
Sure.
So would that suffice, Mr. Massey, if we just do that under Mr. Laddie's report?
If we'd like to, yes.
Okay. All right, let's do that. I think Mr. Laddie's prepared to talk about that. Okay, so we have a motion from Ms. Lane to accept the agenda and the consent agenda. Was there support, Ms. Lane?
No, sir.
I'll support.
Mr. Mansour supports.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Lane, do you want to do the roll call?
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Unmute that.
Mr. Massey? Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go to public comment next. Let me just mute the lines here so we cut down on this feedback. And let's see here. I am going to unmute everyone. Okay, is there anyone that would like to make public comment?
This is Mike Yanko.
Okay, Mr. Yancho? Go ahead, Mr. Yancho. Here, hold on just a moment. I'm going to mute a few lines. Hold on just a moment. Hold on just a second, Mr. Yancho. Mr. Yancho? Go ahead. Here, just one moment, please. I want to mute everybody else. Just a moment here. Make panelist?
No.
Huh?
No.
What do you do then? Mr. Yancho, can you hear me? Mr. Yancho, can you hear us? Yeah. I'm going to make a panelist.
Okay.
Mr. Yancho? Mr. Yancho? Mr. Yancho, can you hear us? Mr. Yancho, can you speak now? Here, don't click on the mute. Mr. Yancho, okay, can you speak now? I think we can hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry for the confusion. I wanted to talk about my perception of some township board and in our community. That's potential in our county for growth and activity.
You know what? You're breaking up, Mr. Yancho. We can't hear you. I believe I have your phone number. If you want, I can give you a call and you can speak through the phone if you'd like. I think that might be easier.
Would probably be acceptable.
Okay, hold on just a moment. Mr. Yancho?
Can you hear me?
Here, just a moment. You're on. Hang up on me. Let me just a moment. Okay, go ahead.
I hope you can hear me now.
We can.
I'd like to address some of the issues I have perceived about our township and some of the things going on. I think our township has a great potential for expansion, to increase our business, to increase our residential involvement, both in numbers and in involvement on both ends, business and residential. As a member of the Planning Commission, I know that we have some building opportunities coming in, even in spite of the crisis that our country faces. Homes are selling in the township, and that's something that I don't think anybody expected at this time. I happen to love the fact that our meetings are out in the open, and that we have transparency that is important to all of our citizens and businesses that live here, work here, and would like to come in. Currently and prospective residents and businesses. But what we
to remember is that this transparency means that potential residents and businesses have access not only to the minutes of our meetings, but also to the video of our meetings and the conduct of our officials at our meetings. I see that too much negativity at our township board meetings. I've always been proud that the township board has not fallen to the levels of some of our neighboring townships as far as the battles that go on, and the publicity, the newspapers, and so on and so forth. But there's been a substantial amount of bickering, and I think we need to remember that our meetings should be respectful and professional. When you're at this meeting, remember that you're on video for the whole world to see. And when you're at a meeting, you should not be making innuendos, accusations, expressing animosity, or grandstanding for personal gain at these meetings. We have to work together to make sure that we progress our community. There's official ways to make accusations and to address complaints that people have, but it's usually not unscripted or not items not on the agenda at a board meeting. So that's the point. I'll stand by it. I'm addressing the entire board, and I want to make sure that we progress our community the best we can.
Okay.
I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Yancho. All right, I'm going to hang up the phone now. I'll try this again and see if we can do it without much static here. Is there anybody that wishes to make public comment that's on the line?
Yeah, Stephanie Woodhuckman.
Stephanie, let's see here. I'm just looking to see it. You might be. Go ahead, Stephanie. I'm sorry, go ahead. What was that? Yeah, it's here. Here, let me see if I can.
Good, man.
Okay, Stephanie, are we able to hear you now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you much better now. Go ahead.
Great. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to introduce myself. Thanks for letting me speak today. Again, my name is Stephanie Witucky, and I'm running for Genesee County Circuit Court Judge. The position I'm running for is absolutely going to be a designated family law seat. The current judge is not seeking re-election, and he does endorse me for his spot. I'm the only candidate with family law experience. I've been a licensed attorney in good standing for 23 years. The first few years I practiced general civil law, and the last 20 years I've devoted exclusively to family law. I'm currently the chief referee in family court in Detroit, where I've been a referee for 10 years, but I'm a longtime Genesee County resident. I was born and raised here, and I only moved to Metro Detroit during law school and to get my career started for a couple of years. I've been consistently in Grand Blanc Township, living here for the last almost 19 years. My husband and I have raised 3 kids here, all in Grand Blanc school system. I volunteer at the school. I have volunteered for the Township Police Department, having been through their Citizens Academy. As far as my professional affiliations, I'm a member of the State Bar of Michigan Family Law Section, the State Bar of Michigan Character and Fitness Committee. I'm currently serving my 3rd consecutive 2-year term there. I was recently elected to the Executive Board of the Referees Association of Michigan as a member at large. I'm a member of the Wayne County Family Law Bar Association. I'm a licensed trainer in restorative practices and a certified domestic relations mediator. I would be honored if you'd consider voting for me in the election upcoming.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Tuckey.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? Is there anybody else that would like to make public comment? Okay, hearing none, we will bring it back to the board. And we will ask for an approval of the minutes. We can either do them singly or all three at once. Would anybody like to make, you're muted just so we can cut down on the feedback. So, anybody wish to make that motion? Mr. Mansour?
Yep, so I make a motion to approve the minutes for May 12th regular board meeting, the 21st study session, and the 26th regular board meeting.
Second.
Okay, supported by Mr. Massey. Any discussion? Ms. Lane, you'd like to call the vote?
Mr. Guzak?
And you guys need to unmute yourself when you go to vote, okay?
Okay.
Mr. Guzak?
You just muted yourself here. Okay, go ahead now.
He's muted again.
Mr. Thomas?
He voted yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Myself, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, we will move on to operational issues. And the first item is the board will consider a motion to accept as the second reading of an ordinance to repeal Article 4, Sections 14.80 through 14.92 of the Tree Protection Ordinance.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Ms. Lane made the motion. Is there support?
I'll support.
Mr. Mansour supports. Any discussion? This is something Mr. Mansour?
Yep, just to kind of bring back the issue from the Tuesday meeting that I have asked Director Lloyd if he would bring forward a couple of the early sections 14-81 plus historic trees for consideration to add to the existing zoning ordinance related to trees. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion on the tree ordinance? This is something we've batted around a few meetings now. We have a motion that's been seconded. Ms. Lane, would you like to call the vote?
All right, Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas?
We can't. He's shaking his head yes. Mr. Atkins? I don't think Mr. Atkins can hear us.
Yes. Aye. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item B, the board will consider a motion to accept as the second reading an ordinance to repeal the Grand Blanc Fire Commission. Mr. Laddie, would you like to bring forward any further information from, I know you emailed out to the board, I believe, earlier today.
I did, and that was regarding a question that Treasurer Guzak had regarding the vehicle. And just briefly, historically, we had already entered into a memorandum of understanding regarding the transfer of the trucks and the personal property, and we had agreed to accept the appraised value of those items, and also we agreed to pay the city approximately 20% of the appraised value of those items. That we accomplished back in December, and the city adopted it in January. Next, we had a comprehensive final audit prepared by Yo&Yo, the results of which led to a recommendation of distribution of the cash assets that were held by the Fire Commission. And that percentage turned out to be slightly different than the 80-20. It turned out to be more of an 84.5% to 85.5% in favor of the township. And so the Fire Commission adopted a resolution accepting that distribution. We adopted a resolution accepting that distribution. And I understand that last night the city adopted the final audit of Yo-and-Yo and also a resolution adopting that distribution. What you have in front of you tonight, though, is just really a housekeeping matter, and that will take off the books the joint ordinance that was created back in 2008 or 2009 that contained an outdated financing scheme and also amended the makeup of the Fire Commission. So we had our first reading of that, and if you accept the second reading tonight, when that ordinance is published, the repeal ordinance is published, that ordinance will be off the books, and then it will be up to the chairman of the Fire Commission to transfer the vehicles into the township's name, and then the fire chief will go close out all the accounts except for one, and then he'll write a check to the city and a check to the township in the amount of the distribution that was agreed on, and then after those checks clear, we'll close that account out and officially be done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Laddie. So we're well aware of the facts, I think, regarding this. Any questions for Mr. Laddie, or are we ready to make a motion to move forward on this?
Attorney Laddie, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I
Mr.
have a
Massey.
question for Attorney Laddie.
Go ahead.
Estimated time frame for this to be resolved.
Chief just indicated again this morning that he is going to begin the closing out of the consolidation of the accounts into one account, and I think that process, we should probably give that process 3 to 5 business days. Then after he writes a check to us and a check to the city, we're going to have to let those checks clear. So again, I think probably another 3 to 5 business days, and then I think we can close that account out. So 2 weeks should do it.
Okay. Would somebody care to make the motion? I'm sorry, Mr. Massey, go ahead.
I so move.
Okay.
Support.
So, motion by Mr. Massey, supported by Mr. Mansour. Ms. Lane, would you like to call the vote?
Yes. Mr. Mansour.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yeah.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Mr. Massey.
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, that's one that's coming to a close after quite a few months of working on it, so we're getting some closure on some things. The next item, item C, under operational issues, the board will consider a motion to approve the road construction agreements with Genesee County Road Commission for repaving Cook Road, Belsey Road, and Reed Road for a total of $118,866.93, and authorize the township supervisor to execute all related contracts and agreements. We mentioned that in addition to CDBG money being able to be used, which saved us a considerable amount of money, the road commission, we're not having to match at 50-50 this year, and they're putting in $271,000 roughly, and we're putting in $118,000. So we'll try and get the number of miles that that equates to, but we can see visibly the work that's being done because it's on some of the worst streets and roads in our township.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Atkins. Mr. Thomas?
I would like to second the motion and call for the vote.
Okay, so there's support by Mr. Thomas. Ms. Lane, would you like to roll call vote?
Mr. Mansour.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak. Mr. Massey.
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Getting some feedback here. Okay, so future agenda items. I don't know if we have anything that we want to put on the board for future discussion. The board reports, I know that our board's committees have been kind of on hold for a while yet, but I know we've got Mr. Massey.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is my third time asking for COVID-19 to be put on the agenda.
Yeah. Well, I know you had mentioned it. I guess, you know, my response in the past has been that we will give an update under Mr. Limata's report, since he's taking care of the operational issues in the township, and he will give us a complete update this evening as well. Okay? So while it's not listed, we will give an update. So, Mr. Mansour, anything with regard to Planning Commission do you like to report on?
Yeah, so just a couple of quick things. First, related to the Planning Commission, we haven't met really much for obvious reasons here, but there are some new site planning review things coming up. But regardless of that, the steering committee for the master plan has met, and we are at the end of the comment section here for the steering committee. We looked at future land use and implementation today, so I would imagine over the next month or two the documents will be drafted up, and we'll be into the phase where we'll have opportunity for town hall public comment on those. I don't know, Mr. Lloyd might say a word here, but the other topic is the Metropolitan Planning Commission. I think we may have had a record 12-minute meeting last time, and basically, you know, just going through the normal transportation improvement programs. It's anything for the township there. But one thing that I would like to draw people's attention to is we approved the Genesee Our County, Our Future plan. So that's out on their website, and is an interesting document. I'll make sure that the Planning Commission has that access to as it ties into what we're doing with our master plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mansour. Next, we have Parks and Rec as well as Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Atkins, anything on Zoning Board of Appeals? Or?
No, we have not met. We will be meeting in July, so a couple things coming up, but nothing to report out right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Atkins. I know that we're in the middle of at the end of dissolving the Fire Commission, but I don't know, Mr. Laddie or Mr. Massey, will there be a need for another final Fire Commission meeting? Do we know?
No. According to the attorney, no. And we are thinking our last meeting, we decided that would be the last meeting, and it would just be paperwork being put in order and signed as appropriate legal requirements. Okay,
very good. Well, we want to figure out one of our upcoming, probably one of the meetings we can do in person where we can recognize our members that have served on the Fire Commission, but I'd rather wait until we can meet in person to recognize their years of service on the Fire Commission. We have Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, I know that we've been using the new fire truck in service now for a while, but I think it still would be appropriate if we would do the push-in ceremony, seeing that most of us have never done it, and I'd like to see our new, pretty new fire truck.
Absolutely. I think, you know, hopefully in the next, I'm hoping that we can have our next meeting, our fourth Tuesday meeting, right here at the township and not have to use an online service. And maybe we can get with the chief and see if maybe we can do it prior to that meeting, if that would work. So I know the chief is on the line, and let's talk about doing that after the meeting and see if we can't make it happen prior to our next board meeting. Okay? Good suggestion, Mr. Thomas. Okay, with that, Mr. Guzak, anything to report?
No, the only thing is a lot of the villages have been changed, and because of the COVID-19 section, we haven't received a lot of their final statements authorizing us to put the bills, so it's going to put us behind a little bit, and I think the state actually extended some deadlines, which puts assessing behind a little bit farther too. So we'll keep you updated on that.
Mm-hmm. I think there's even some legislation that would allow people to defer some of their payment, but we'll see where that goes. Ms. Lane, anything from the clerk's office?
Well, the clerk is buried with a lot of absentee voter applications. I am asking that anybody that has an absentee ballot application, that you drop it off in the TAN mailbox, because there's still a lot of paperwork to process. And also, there may still be people in the public who have not registered to vote. So I would like them to come in next week when we're open and get registered to vote, and not delay until the day of the election on August the 4th.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lane. And the voting equipment that we ordered, is that on schedule?
I have asked for them to give me an update just yesterday.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm right in the process of hiring 100 and some people to work this election, because now we have 17 precincts and 5 absentee counting boards. So keep us in your prayers, gentlemen.
I know that we have on social media some recruitment mentions looking for more poll workers, correct?
We have, and my precinct chairs are calling all of the people that have ever worked for them to make sure which ones are willing to work in August.
Okay. Mr. Mansur, you have a question for Ms. Lane?
Yes, just out of curiosity, for the poll workers, election workers, how much training is required, and how is that provided?
The training is something that we're going to have to fit in between now and August. Every 2 years, anybody that has worked an election must be recertified, and generally it runs about 3 to 4 hours. New election workers will have about the same time, and then we'll have some follow-up with our chair people, along with our new AV counting board people. And so we're going to have a tight schedule, and we're hoping that this we can expand so we can get more people in for these trainings rather than have to have numerous trainings at night.
Okay.
And I also can tell you, gentlemen, there's the ballots will probably be late because we still have a court case pending on one of the positions in Genesee County, and they can't print the ballots until these decisions are finalized with the courts.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lane. I'd like Mr. Ladd, or I'm sorry, Mr. Massey, go ahead.
I have a question for Clerk Lane. Clerk Lane, do you have a number in mind based on some of the negative publicity that the voting by mail has gotten? Will you be prepared to have enough poll workers in case there is a hitch-up regarding some of them may become ill and etc.?
To all of the board members, to clarify for you and for some of the residents that have called and have been concerned, all applications that come in for absentee ballots, the signatures are checked against each voter's MasterCard. We have contacted voters where the signatures do not match, and those ballots will not be sent out until we have verified those signatures on the application. When the applications come back, they are also verified against the MasterCard to ensure that it is according to the current voter signature. So I am confident that my staff is watching, and we're all watching to make sure that every voter that wants to vote votes, and that only people with verified signatures are getting ballots or returning ballots.
Ms. Lane,
voter registration.
Ms. Lane, as far as the training now, Mr. Mansur asked the question. They're paid for that time that they spend training, is that correct?
They're paid $10 an hour for the training.
Okay.
So
all right.
That's...
Okay, thank you. With that, I'd like to go to Superintendent Limata, and maybe you can give us an update on both the COVID response and where we're at with some of our projects. Mr. Limata?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I don't really have anything to add on the COVID-19 update that wasn't already provided in my written report to the board. You're all aware of the new executive orders that moved all regions of the state to phase 4, and I think starting today to phase 5 for the UP and northern 21 counties in northern lower Michigan. The good news is it did allow us to open up the township general offices a little bit more for some transactions and bring back the employees who had been laid off during this time. We have the office open this week by appointment. Next week we will allow walk-in traffic. We're still encouraging folks to make appointments because it just helps with limiting the traffic into the facilities. We still all have to maintain the safe social distancing. The executive orders still require that there are no more than 10 people in an indoor area. So, I mean, we can certainly, with appointments, we can move people around. Good news is we're also going to be able to get our assessing team back out into the field to start doing some of those. They developed a new plan so that people can be contacted if they so wish. Normally they would go and they get a letter and it says that they're going to be doing your neighborhood, and then they would go and knock on the door, show their badge, introduce themselves. But to eliminate that contact, they will be out there with PPE. They'll be doing visuals of the neighborhoods or individual properties, but they're not going to knock on the door. We do encourage people to fill out the survey that you get that will answer all the questions, and there's no need for that knock. But if somebody's concerned, they would like a phone call or a text before our assessing team shows up on their property, we're certainly going to make that available, and we'll let them know that we would be on their property that day. The rest of it, the employee expectations document has been provided to everybody and retrained through the department heads. And then one of the new requirements is that every facility has basically a COVID-19 champion, so that all employees know who to report to get their questions answered if anything comes up about COVID-19. So we have someone, obviously, for general administration, the police department, and the fire department. Kind of where we're at
with COVID-19. I think when the board members come into the office building, they'll notice a number of physical changes have been made to protect both employees and any residents that come into the building, starting with a sanitation or I don't know if sanitation is the correct word, but basically a sanitizing station, I guess, at each entrance to the building, where there's hand sanitizer and wipes and what have you that we ask them to use on their way in. We also ask anybody coming in to wear a mask. There's the sneeze shields that we put up wherever customer, or residents or customers of the township would need to have a face-to-face with one of our customer service reps. Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, to the superintendent. Are we, where do you stand in terms of going forward, looking at what departments and what roles people may play in working remotely?
So the governor's executive order is still encouraging anybody who can work remotely to do so. A lot of our work, what we've uncovered through this, can be done at least on a part-time basis. So we're trying to alternate schedules, so different departments that can work remotely, and primarily it involves the department heads, and we're trying to rotate it so that if they're not all in the building at the same time, if they're going to take 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and that's about the max for anybody, that they can actually work remotely without being in the office physically, that we're not all out on the same day or all in on the same day. So we're trying to develop that schedule as we move forward. And right now it's been kind of a round robin where everybody's publishing, look, my day will be Wednesday that I will work remotely, that kind of thing. We're going to put that master schedule together. We keep a calendar for all the department head time off, and we're going to incorporate that in. So they're also going to mark the dates that they can kind of scatter that out, keep the head count in the building down.
Is this something that post-COVID you could see us moving into the direction like most of the, most companies are moving, where this could be not just COVID related, but people could have the flexibility to do some of their projects remotely?
Yeah, that's a great question, Trustee Adkins, and I will tell you that, even personally, I found that I can be very productive working in my home office, obviously. Fewer interruptions, certainly, but I think that moving forward, we'll have to, if that holds true for everybody, and I did get that feedback from most of the department heads, is that they did find that they could work quite effectively at home. I can see us moving forward, especially as you guys are well aware, we're in a space cramp in this building, until we move forward with, start looking at, expanding our campus to include the new DPW and fire station. And it actually could help us even there, that maybe we have shared office space in some areas, and that certainly could play a role in that.
Okay. All right. And I'll give my report last, but Mr. Laddie?
Well, Mr. Chairman, Trustee Massey raised a question regarding 2 lawsuits that are currently pending, and they both involve the police department. And I guess I'll go chronologically in reverse. On Monday, Superintendent Lehman received an email from Gus Morris from McGraw Morris, who is a firm that's hired frequently by our insurance carrier, and Mr. Morris provided an update to Mr. Lehman on 2 cases. The first one was a small claims case that's pending here in Grand Lake District Court, and Mr. Morris reported that the case is set for a bench trial June 24th. It was essentially Judge Odette will be hearing the case, and he expects that the case will result in a favorable decision on behalf of the township. And the allegation was that due to and again, when I talk about the allegations, I'm just talking about what's in the complaint, right? Because we talked earlier on about the fact that we're not going to have any attorney-client discussions, but both of these complaints are public documents. And so I'm just going to, whatever facts I give you will be out of these public documents. The allegation is that as a result of the police being to a Grand Lake business, it turns out that the individual had several warrants for his arrest. The officers executed those warrants, and the allegation is that the defendant had personal property damaged by the township police in that exchange, and that matter was initially filed in Grand Lake Small Claims Division, and that matter was removed out of the Small Claims Division to the regular division of the district court. But the damages are for $6,000, and Mr. Morris provided an additional update also, and he reported on a case called Marshall versus Grand Lake Township. He advised that case was currently pending in federal court, and that it had not necessarily been certified by the court for service on the parties. He said that the process is in federal court that a magistrate will review the complaint and determine if it actually meets minimum thresholds to be considered an active case, and then service can be accomplished by the parties. So anybody who's named in that case would not have been served yet because it hasn't been certified as viable by the court. As soon as Mr. Lehman received those emails from Mr. Morris, he forwarded them to me. As soon as I received them, I forwarded to you. I paraphrased Mr. Morris's synopsis. And then the next day, I asked Mr. Morris for any documents relating to the Marshall case, because that case did not ring a bell to me. I was familiar with the Spalding case in Grand Lake District Court. Mr. Morris forwarded to me the complaint in the Marshall case, and then later that day, I forwarded to you the complaint in the Marshall case and also the documents that relate to the Spalding case in Grand Lake District Court. My reading of the complaint in the Spalding case is not necessarily, it doesn't have any racial allegations. It does allege misconduct by the police. But I want to say that allege is a very important word because there's been no adjudication. There will be an adjudication by Judge McDevitt on the 24th if he proceeds. And I want to add a footnote here that cases haven't been proceeding because of COVID. Courts haven't been in session. Trials have not been occurring since approximately mid-March. And so these matters have been sitting around for a while waiting to be determined. And I'm not necessarily sure that June 24th date is a date where a trial will actually occur. Anyway, when I read the allegations in the federal case, it certainly does have what it alleges wrongdoing on behalf of Grand Blanc Township Police, some residents of Grand Blanc. It also includes County Prosecutor Layton. It includes Attorney General Schuette, and also maybe amended to include our new Attorney General Nessel. It is a document that includes a number of incendiary allegations, and it is certainly true that the basis of them is that we discriminated against this individual because of his race. I want to go now into the time, and by the way, that case hasn't even been determined to be a viable case yet. We have not received efficient service, so we haven't even provided an answer to this case. So these are all essentially unfounded allegations at this point in time. That case is interesting to me because, and let me back up now to how we first learned about these cases. In January of this year, Chief Wiles sent an email to me and to Mr. Limita regarding his receipt of a small claims case, and that's the Spalding case where there's an allegation of the property damage being destroyed. We talked a little bit about that case, and so on January 20th, we had a discussion about some of the allegations in that case. What happened next was that I reported the existence of that case along with the McLaren tax appeal the next day, January 22nd, and I can say to you, this, and I'll quote from an email I sent you. The second case was filed in Small Claims Division of Grand Blanc District Court by a plaintiff claiming the police department destroyed $6,000 of personal property, presumably pursuant to an arrest, but it's not clear from the allegations in the complaint. Chief Wiles forwarded the complaint to the Tokyo Insurance Claims Department for likely assignment of counsel. That's the Spalding case, and so when Chief Wiles reported it to Mr. Lehman and I, the next day you got a report from me on that case, and I'm guessing by the representation of Mr. Morris that Mr. Lehman did forward that to Tokyo, and they did assign Mr. Morris that case. The second case is more troubling for me because when Mr. Morris gave his synopsis on the Marshall case, I wrote it back and I said, I don't remember this being a case necessarily. I don't remember the facts of this case. Certainly I don't remember any civil rights case. But he sent me the complaint, and immediately I recognized some of the allegations in the federal complaint. And they came to us by an email, came to me in particularly by an email from Ms. Lane, February 17th. And I think that the plaintiff in the case, Mr. Marshall, asked that his correspondence be read to the township board in its entirety. And his correspondence it mentions a lawsuit, but really I would characterize it more as just a cut and paste of different web addresses and also emails and photographs. And when I saw this, I wrote back to Kathy and said, if the township's been served, either your office, the supervisor, police department, or any employees, take the documents directly to Dennis and he'll forward them appropriately. We don't comment on pending and certainly not possible litigation. And similarly, we don't distribute materials to the board or employees. And that was the same day that she forwarded it to me. And by the way, I mean, just so I'm going to tell you about the emails we got. It was sent to Kathy, to Earl, to Dennis, and to Mr. Massey. And the original email went to Mr. Massey, Mr. Kuzak, and Ms. Lane. And again, that was the request to read this document at a township board meeting into the record. Dennis responds, I informed Clerk Lane that this has been going on for several years for Mr. Marshall, and the township has never been a party to any legal action that we're aware of to date. And given the statement from Mr. Morris, this case has not been served on anybody because it's not been determined to be a viable case by the federal court yet. And so Trustee Massey's correct. We do have 2 lawsuits that allege misconduct by our police department. One involves an allegation of racial involvement, and the other one does not. And so that is my understanding of the history of the cases. And Mr. Morris again is representing the township in both matters at the request of our insurance counsel. And so if anybody has any questions or wants me to comment, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Mr. Massey, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I have a very concerning question. And I guess this is directed more at the superintendent. Many of us have asked the superintendent to tell us when someone filed a complaint against the township in advance. And the superintendent has totally ignored that. He has never notified any trustee about any complaint, a legal complaint. He has never.
Yeah. Okay.
We asked him to do that.
Okay.
He had ignored our request until something goes to the court. We asked him to give us prior information, prior to court information. Keep us abreast. He has failed to realize to keep us abreast.
All right. Mr. Limita, I think Mr. Laddie just answered that question. Now, Mr. Laddie, who reports these things to the board?
Well, it's my understanding is it's a combination of Mr. Limita and myself.
And
I will say I don't have direct contact with Mr. Morris, and so that may make it a little difficult for me to report directly what he said. But in this last instance, as soon as Dennis got that email, he sent it to me, and I sent it on to the board.
So it has been instantaneous. Mr. Limita?
Prior, I believe, what Trustee Massey's referring to is there was an insurance claim a year ago, and the board talked about not being aware of that insurance claim. We talked about lawsuits and who should report it. At that board meeting, it was determined that all of the legal matters would be reported by Attorney Laddie. Every time I get information on anything, I immediately submit it to Attorney Laddie. In this particular case, we got the letter, a long rambling letter from Mr. Marshall to the clerk's office, which then came to me in November of 2019. If original complaint was from fall or August of 2016, and it was reported to the board that we had gotten a letter from this Mr. Marshall, that would have been like August of 2016. The next letter we got was in November of 2019, and on the envelope, it was asked to provide a copy to me, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Massey, the clerk, and Chief Wiles. We made copies of that letter, and they were given to all of those parties, including Trustee Massey. At the very same day I received the letter, I gave a copy at that meeting, made photocopies of this long rambling letter, handed one to Trustee Massey handed one to Mr. Laddie and said, and again, it wasn't a lawsuit, it was a long rambling complaint alleging a lot of things against the city, the state, the attorney general, the mayor of Grand Blanc. It's a laundry list of folks. So the day I got it, it went to Mr. Massey, Mr. Laddie, Mr. Bennett, copy to Wiles, Clerk Lane had it also, went to her originally. And then we forward that to McGraw-Morris because they're the ones who handle those types of claims for us. And in fact, that day, Mr. Massey, you spoke with Chief Wiles at the Diaz about that letter because you wanted some clarification on it. And you don't have to take my word for it. I'm sure you can ask Mr. Wiles to refresh your memory.
So the bottom line is that we do report those things immediately. I'll allow one more follow-up, Mr. Massey, and then we're moving on. Mr. Massey?
I'd like to say, individual conversation is not a board conversation. It's the superintendent's responsibility to report information to the board as a whole. It's not Joe Massey's, Trustee Massey's responsibility to report information to the board as a whole. Yeah. And this, the leadership coming from the superintendent, it has reached the point that he feels as though he doesn't have to report to the board.
Okay. I disagree. I disagree entirely with that assessment or those disparaging remarks. I believe that.
I knew you were going to disagree.
I have the floor, Mr. Massey. Thank you. If you wish to speak, please let me know. But I believe that Mr. Limita has reported those. Any letter that we've received, that goes to Mr. Laddie and to our insurance company. And I'm very confident that we have been apprised of those. It'd be nice if we were apprised, by the individual that they're going to be sending them, but when we get them, we forward them. And like we said, this wasn't even a lawsuit. This was a long rambling letter, but yet it was forwarded to our attorney as well. Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, I don't know if we need a policy, but I'd like to see if going forward, I think even if there's a potential for some sort of litigation, even if there are allegations, maybe some sort of summary. I don't know if that would be from Attorney Laddie. It sounds like there's another attorney that was involved in this one. I don't know how we just get, control of all that and just keep, just keep a running total if there's anything going on, just so we're aware of it.
Okay. I'd like Mr. Limita and Mr. Laddie to respond. Mr. Limita?
Mr. Bennett, because anything that's going to be a potential litigation, it should be going filtered through Mr. Laddie to the board so you have attorney-client privileged communication. When I receive information, I'm always going to send it to Mr. Laddie. That is the best point of contact for the board. Not me, Mr. Laddie, because it becomes attorney-client privileged information, especially when it's pending litigation. Now, if the board wants to go in another manner and you just want me to report to you, like Mr. Massey is suggesting, I'll absolutely be happy to do that. But I believe that the appropriate way to do it is how it stands now. I report to Mr. Laddie, and he reports it out to the board.
Mr. Laddie, is that an accurate assessment of how things should work?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. The only caveat that I want to address is that I need direct contact with McGraw-Morris and our insurance company, and I don't think they have a problem with that. I wrote when we saw Mr. Morris's emails, I wrote him directly, and I said, "Hey, tell us more about this case." I would like to make sure, and Mr. Limita does a nice job at this, but I want to make sure that there isn't any, that I'm not left out of the loop as far as our insurance counsel goes, because if I'm the one reporting to you, I do have the ability to report to you under attorney-client privilege, but I need to know any of the moving parts, and that's the only piece in this puzzle that I would say that needs some additional improvement, is just that piece, and I think it can be solved.
Yeah, we can let McGraw and Morris know that to include you on any communication. Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas?
Through you, Supervisor Bennett, Attorney Laddie. Attorney Laddie, we are, correct me if I'm wrong, or just, what is the policy right now that was set last year at the exact time? When we, I would like to know the exact policy, and it included yourself with a certain amount of responsibility in it, and a certain amount of Superintendent Leibniz responsibility. Could you please refresh this board?
My recollection is that I obviously, let me back up for a second. My office represents Grand Lake Township on all of the misdemeanor matters they could file concerning township criminal matters. We represent the township on all municipal civil matters. We represent the township on tax tribunal matters and also land use planning and zoning matters. We have an insurance policy that allows us to have counsel assigned by the insurance company, and they've consistently assigned us with McGraw-Morris. I am happy to always report to you and always I'll discuss ad nauseum any case you want to talk about in Grand Lake Township that I'm involved in. I'm also happy to report to you cases that the insurance council has, but I do not have a direct. Insurance council does not contact me directly. That email from Mr. Morris went to Mr. Limita, and Mr. Limita immediately forwarded it to me. My only complaint in this matter would be that I can't report to you on things that haven't been reported to you, haven't been reported to me or Mr. Limita from insurance council. And so the other thing that we want to do is even allegations, even anything that comes into our offices, either through the clerk's office or the police department or anything, we would need to get central flow so that I'll be able to report that to you. And so far, we've just got an additional step in the process. It seems to work okay, but that's the only glitch that I can think of. And so, to answer your question, it would be a combination, I would think, of me and Mr. Limita. But if you cut Mr. Limita out or you include me into the conversation with McGraw-Morris, then you've got two people reporting and two people with the information.
Mr. Limita and then Ms. Lane.
And so one of the challenges we had with McGraw-Morris from the time I got here is no communication coming to me from McGraw-Morris either. And it took us forever to get that straightened out up until about a year ago that I was actually included on updates on any kind of case that they're dealing with. And primarily they deal with the things that anything to do with the police department. That was a struggle in itself. That has been corrected. We ended up having to have a little come to Jesus meeting with McGraw-Morris and with Tokyo Marine, and now that has been corrected. We get contact. We know who the attorneys are assigned to each case anytime we're doing anything. And again, I still, your legal updates I think are better coming from David. I'm happy to do it if that's the way you want to go, but my recommendation is that and they'll include whoever we want to include now that we've got those lines of communication done. If you want them to include Mr. Laddie on it, then that's fine. Otherwise, I will just continue to do what I've always done and forward it immediately to Mr. Laddie for reporting to the board.
Okay, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Supervisor, listening to what Superintendent Limita has been saying about poor communication, I would be more than willing to make a motion to inform our insurance carrier and any attorneys that they decide to choose to represent the township must be in full contact with the township attorney. So if there's even a possibility that David could assist them in a legal matter, that can be done. But I believe we should have a very firm board motion that indicates to our insurance carrier that our board wants full and open communication with our township attorney and our township superintendent, because in the past there are times when insurance companies decide to settle something rather than spend any money, but we do need that open and honest communication, and I want it said to them even stronger by having a board motion that says we've been dissatisfied and we want it and demand it.
Yeah, I would support it that we include Mr. Laddie on communication, just so that Mr. Laddie can report and he has that information. Mr. Guzak?
Yes, I don't know if you heard me or not. I said I would second that motion.
Okay, all right. Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas?
Through you to Attorney Laddie. Attorney Laddie, do you remember the board consensus we had about all the cases, criminal or otherwise, through the Grand Lake Township? Do you remember the board consensus and the motions that were made about how we would not expect those cases to be sent by you, but through Superintendent Limina? Do you remember any of that, Attorney Laddie?
I remember us discussing the fact that communication, that if I don't have communication with Tokyo Marine or the attorneys that they assigned the claim, I can't report that to you. We talked.
Exactly.
I said to you at one point, I said I can't tell you what I've not been told.
Well, there's a motion on the floor and it's been seconded. Mr. Limita?
And just a point of clarification, this is the first notice we've got from Tokyo Marine on this Marshall case. The very first piece of information from them. And again, as Attorney Laddie explained, it's not even technically a case at this time. And this is the very first piece of information we got from them. Previously, it was a letter from Mr. Marshall, which was handed out. So, again, the minute we got information, it was provided to the board.
Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, I just, in terms of the motion that's on the table here, I'd just like to be very clear in the motion that we have a single kind of point of contact responsible for communicating to the board. I don't want to, have a handoff or just be unclear about that.
So who are you? So I think, I don't know, I would prefer to have Mr. Laddie so that we retain attorney-client privilege in those communications.
That's fine as long as he's in the direct communication loop with outside.
Right. Ms. Lane, would you be willing to amend your motion to make David the board point of contact for those?
Absolutely, because it was my intent to have David clearly able to negotiate or discuss with the insurance carrier in any settlement that we as a board have to
Okay.
approve.
Mr. Guzak, would you approve that since you seconded the motion?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Mr. Massey, discussion?
Yes. I think we should add that the moment that the township receives information, regardless what kind of information it is, small or big, minute or whatever it may be, the board should be notified. Not when it gets in not until the legal process. It should be notified prior to the legal process.
Well, I think, if it looks like a lawsuit, then we send it to Mr. Laddie. Mr. Laddie, would you care to respond?
I think Mr. Mass is making an interesting point, and it's a good point. I look at the communication that came to us as not technically a lawsuit, but that doesn't mean that the board shouldn't know about it and shouldn't consider it and shouldn't analyze it, because if somebody's making allegations against Grand Lake Township, I think the board needs to be informed quickly and be able to have discussion about it. For example, this federal case right now isn't an actual case. It's got a lot of allegations in it. Personally, I know that some of them are false because some of them involve Mr. Gelser in our office, and they're just patently ridiculous and false. But that doesn't mean that the board shouldn't take a look at them. And if there's a policy discussion to be had, or if there's a discussion with a department in Grand Lake Township for employees, then we should have that. And so I think that's a good point, and I'm happy to facilitate that. In fact, I'm happy to even though I just said that this federal case is hard to read, it's even hard to print because it's in such an odd format. But it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be something the board should take a look at and consider and discuss. And so I'm in full support of what Mr. Massey just said.
So in terms of you being the point of contact, that if we receive something that looks like a lawsuit, that we send it to you and you can decide whether or not it goes to the board?
Sure.
Or have it go out under attorney-client privilege anyways. Okay, let's, Mr. Massey and then Mr. Adkins.
What'd you say?
I said Mr. Massey and then Mr. Adkins.
Okay. I want to clear up something you said, Mr. Chair. Not that it looks like a potential lawsuit. Any allegation that comes into the township, the board should know about it. And let me give you an example. Here's what has been happening since I've been on the board, is that there are certain things that go on in the township. I hear from the resident. They come to me complaining. I don't know anything about it. It puts me at awe. So we have someone supposed to be leading us, but we're not getting the information that we need.
Well, I can say that we receive allegations every day of some sort. I think Mr. Guzak, as treasurer, will receive, allegations that, we process somebody's check late for payment. We'll receive allegations that we raise somebody's property taxes in a way that is not legal. We receive, anybody that comes in here with a complaint could be an allegation. So, Mr. Laddie?
I'll take those.
Okay.
I see a lot of them anyway, and I want Mr. Thomas is still here, I think. What Mr. Massey described exactly what happened to Mr. Thomas, I think, back in the summer when he had a customer into his store and basically confront him and was very unhappy about how she was treated in a lawsuit that was filed in Grand Blanc District Court and that was resolved by Tokyo Marine without input from the Grand Blanc Township Board. And that put Mr. Thomas in a very bad position, and I'm guessing that's why he's very adamant about having this cleared up, because he was the victim of exactly what Trustee Massey just said.
Okay. Mr. Mansour, did you have your hand up? Or?
Yeah, we can make this motion now, but I think we ought to have it followed up with some kind of a policy, so that it's clear what the mechanisms are here, just so we don't lose our board memory.
I think we need to, there's been a couple of points here, and I think if, Ms. Lane would allow, I think we need to have Mr. Laddie maybe draft something that I understand what Mr. Mansour is saying. I want to make sure all the lines are clear and we're not just kind of throwing something together. Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, it seems like it's more appropriate that, we have a policy and then we can vote to adopt it.
Yeah. Mr. Atkins, did I skip over you? Or?
That, you guys covered it.
Okay. Ms. Lane, what would, I know Mr. Mansour offered a suggestion. Would you be accepting of that, or?
I would be in concurrence with adding that to the motion, that it be followed up with a policy to be adopted by drafted by the attorney and approved by the board.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
That's excellent.
Okay. Ms. Lane, would you like to call for the vote?
Right. Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Adkins?
Yes.
Mr. Guzak?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Thank you. Myself, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to a few comments that I'd like to make with regard to the township. Let me just go ahead and mute a few lines here. One of the things that we're seeing happening with the reopening is that restaurants are able to reopen at 50% capacity. And I've seen a few other municipalities do this, and it's something that I think we should consider. And I will be forwarding some proposed language to Mr. Laddie to take a look at and maybe bring to our 4th Tuesday meeting. But it's to relax a few of the requirements of restaurants with regard to outdoor dining. If we're able to accommodate some restaurants that are only able to have 50% inside, there might be a way that with having oversight by our building director and possibly our police and fire to make sure that it's safe, that somehow we can relax that a little bit for a period of time so that restaurants or facilities that serve food are able to remain profitable and stay in our township, because if they're only able to operate at 50%, giving them a little bit of extra room outside might be helpful. I know that the Michigan Liquor Control Commission has done something similar in terms of speeding up the ability for those with the alcohol license or license to serve alcohol are able to fairly quickly expand to the outdoor area. One of the things that's happening in the state legislature, the Senate a few weeks ago passed SB 690, Senate Bill 690. It approves $100 million of the COVID stimulus money from the federal government. It approves it for hazard pay for first responders. It would allow for $1,000 per first responder. That passed the Senate and is in the House. I've spoken with a number of legislators who feel that it will be moving forward and going to the governor's desk. We've been told that we will get the application. It has to go to the state treasurer's office after it goes for the signature of the governor. We're not sure how long that will take, but it would be my hope that this board would, if they approve that, we'll be able to come back to the board and we'll go ahead and file the request to receive $1,000 for each of our first responders. They have it at $100 million right now, and I believe with the number of police officers in the state, I'm not sure about how many there are and how many firefighters, but they're going to leave it at $100 million for now, and they'll come back if they need more. But so that's something that's progressing. Some exciting news that I know Mr. Lehman has been a champion for, and we've got a group called the Grand Blanc Grid, which is a group of residents that have been very active in terms of trying to expand the non-motorized pathways here in Grand Blanc. Within the last week or so, we've been communicating on an ongoing basis for several years with the county. But within the past week and a half, we've had especially some additional communication in that we believe that the county, through Jacob Maurer and the planning division, there may be some funds that are left over from some other projects that we can utilize for the Dort Highway extension pathway. The reason why that pathway is so critical is Mr. Limita applied for DNR money to put that pathway in, because right now with the wetland mitigation and the engineering costs of putting in the Dort Highway extension, we can do that wetland mitigation and engineering for the non-motorized pathway at the same time. If we have to try and do it a few years later, it is going to be financially impossible, or impractical anyways. So anyways, the county has come forward and said we believe we can help push the needle a little bit further. One of the things that we're going to need to do, I know the board in the past has already approved some capital expenditure to help support that, but I am going to ask our DDA to assist with funding it, and we will need to ask this board, and we'll probably come back with some more solid numbers on the 4th Tuesday of this month as far as using some of the park millage money for that. The reason why this is a linchpin, this Dort Highway extension, is because from there the funding, we believe, and what the county is telling us, will be much easier to get from the DNR to complete it from Cook Road up to Grand Blanc Road. It would need to go under the underpass on Cook Road and then go down Embury. But what that does is it connects so much more of Grand Blanc to the pathways at Genesis. It connects people in the south part of the township to Bicentennial Park, and really starts the ball rolling in terms of a network. We also are excited to say that we've also spoken with the Road Commission, Mr. Limita and myself, in the past week or two, And it looks like there is also federal money, stimulus money, due to the COVID-19 stimulus, that they're looking for economic projects in Genesee County. And one of the projects that the DDA has been very aggressive on is doing something with Baldwin Road, between where the Dort Highway Extension will meet Baldwin Road and where it will go all the way down east to Saginaw Street. One of the things we've been working fast and furious on, I know Mr. Lehman has, with Rowe Engineering, is to look at what those costs are, and we are in the process of submitting for Genesee County that project to the federal government for funding. Tying that in with the pathway, it'd be great if we could also include a pathway from the Dort Highway Extension down Baldwin Road all the way to Saginaw Street. So we're hopeful that this expansion of Baldwin Road will happen. It's about a $4 million project. So hopefully some good luck will come our way and we will win that grant. If not, the DDA will continue to pursue other means of doing it. The paving projects, we talked about those. That is making our township look great. We're still waiting for word on the Ally Challenge to find out if that's going to happen in the township. I know that Mr. Lehman has been active on a committee that's been asking the governor to allow that to occur in our township. Hopefully it does. It provides millions of dollars to local charities and also to our economy. Just a final comment on the pathway. The Iron Belt Trail, also there's some things happening out in Atlas Township that will connect their trail to the township and also be part of the Iron Belt Trail, so that's exciting. Don't forget we've got the mosquito abatement program. Anybody ask any questions about it, the easiest way is to direct them to our website. We also are seeing quite an expansion on our Nextdoor app. We've seen the percentage of households that are participating in that application continuing to grow. So our communication with our residents, I think, is at an all-time high through that Nextdoor app. And we're pushing out as much information as we can through that. With that, that's all I have for my report. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I have a question. I don't know who to direct my question to. You are the superintendent. This week I had to install a hot water tank. I had to pull a permit. Why did I have to pull a permit?
Well, it's probably one of our ordinances. I don't know if Mr. Laddie or Mr. Limita who wishes to speak to that.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Limita if he's willing.
Sure. We have a permit for any of those plumbing inspections, anything like that. I had the same thing, Mr. Massey, when I put in a new air conditioning unit and furnace in my home a year ago. I had to pull a permit and have inspectors come out from the township to review it. It's a safety feature and it's built into our building codes, and that's why we have the permit process.
We actually, I have heard complaints in other communities from residents, Mr. Massey, that they've purchased a house that had equipment installed in a faulty manner and blamed the municipality for not requiring them to have a permit, where they did have a permit process, but the person just didn't follow the instructions and installed it themselves and may have caused a very dangerous situation. Mr. Massey?
I understand, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I understand that part of it. The last sentence that the superintendent made, I want to follow up on it. I'm going to expound on it. He said someone comes out to inspect. I'm thinking that this came from the superintendent, that we don't have inspectors.
We have inspectors. Definitely have inspectors.
For all of that.
Yeah, we definitely have inspectors.
Yeah, I've had inspectors in my house when they change my items. And I got signatures right on my air conditioner and my hot water heater.
Yeah, I mean,
well, let me say this. I think I'm the only one that has ever pulled a permit and had a bad experience with the township. I've never seen an inspector come out to at my house after I pulled a permit. Have never.
Well, I I've had them inspect my deck, I've had them inspect my addition, I've had them inspect everything, so I don't know. I must have had bad luck.
I built the deck, no inspector came out. I'm just telling you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Atkins?
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the topic, what is the, who handles the, is there a board that handles, is that more of an operations thing, or if we wanted to go through the list of, you know, our building inspection list and what we do and what we charge, who sets that? Is that this board?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the charges are, but...
Every year in the budget process, we also push the fee schedule out that shows all the fees that are collected. Those are, again, carefully regulated by the state, and we pretty much follow the state's charges for what they use. Our inspectors are independent contractors for us, and then you have to treat the building revenue and those inspection and permit fees the same as if they were enterprise funds or another type of business fund, where you can't overcharge. It has to be enough to cover the cost of operating the building department. So, I mean, they are pretty closely regulated, but you guys have them every year during the budget process. It's included in the fee schedule. And again, they're really, the recommendation comes from your building department or your building director.
So I see Mr. Thomas has his hand up, but Mr. Limita, who determines whether or not inspections are needed? Is that something that is a state requirement? I know that there's other municipalities that do not have inspectors that allow the state to take care of it, and I've heard complaints lately that they are extremely backed up and that there are no, during this shutdown, there have been no inspections, and so other municipalities that utilize the state inspectors are falling way behind. But is it, go ahead.
Yeah, again, it's not a service that you guys have to offer as a township. If you don't want to, you can push that on the state. One of the reasons that you go through and do it is because that's exactly right. The municipalities that are using state inspectors, they don't have any control over it. So you're trying to get a final on a permit so that you could move forward with something, and the state could take, you know, you call for an inspection and they say it'll be 3 to 4 weeks and someone will contact you. I think that was one of the reasons why the township started up their program in the first place, but we can be much more responsive. We can do an inspection on the same day. And as far as Trustee Massey's, he has a lot of open permits that were never finaled. I'll go ahead and let Mr. Lloyd know that, and he can take a look in the system to see you know, why you would have open permits that had never been finaled, because that shouldn't be happening. You should be getting those permits signed off. Anyone who's doing work for you that doesn't call to have that final inspection done, that's an issue, and maybe we can take a look at any contractors that you use who have not called for final inspection services as well.
Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas?
Through you, Supervisor Bennett, the Superintendent Limita. So just a point of clarification. So Ted Stepanski, our director, is an independent contractor, so he's 1099 now, along with Steve Hatfield and Amy Farmer. Yes, Farmer, I'm sorry.
Those are not inspectors, though. Go ahead, Mr. Limita.
Ted Stepanski is the building official, so he's the one who recruits and manages the 1099, the contract inspectors. Ted's the official who does site plan approvals or building plan approvals.
And actually, our two code enforcement people, Steve Hatfield and Amy, Dennis, can you explain their role? And they're not 1099, are they?
No, they're employees. They're not. The code enforcement officials are actual employees.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Thomas?
Well, so what you're saying is that independent contractors are the ones that also work for the state of Michigan and Grand Blanc City and everyone else, correct?
They could, yeah.
Yeah. Miss Lane? Miss Lane?
If I could throw in some history, back in the 90s, because we saw that you had maybe 3 building inspectors that cover multiple counties, and where I worked in Bloomfield Hills, we did our own inspections. That's when we introduced it here, because we were having building and no inspections and problems. So we instituted that in the 90s, and it's been very successful. And then the city decided to utilize the same inspectors and asked for permission to use those same inspectors in the city.
Well, and the other thing is that a lot of these inspections have to occur before the next stage of construction can occur. And so if they have to wait 2 months to get an inspection to move on, we're going to be slowing down some people bringing development here. Mr. Thomas, and then let's
I just wanted to make note that I believe that Mr. Stefanski and Mr. Hatfield and Amy Farmer, I think they do an outstanding job for what they have to deal with.
All right.
So there was not a slight on them. They do a great job.
Okay, thank you.
All right. With that one.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Mansour?
Yep, I can make a motion to adjourn the meeting tonight.
Is there support? Ms. Lane?
I'll support it.
Okay, Ms. Lane?
Well, that's right. Roll call. Mr. Mansour.
Yes.
Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
Mr. Adkins.
Yes.
Mr. Guzak.
Yes.
Mr. Massey.
Yes.
Yes for me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Have a wonderful evening, gentlemen.
Okay. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your patience and kindness.
Always.
Okay, bye.
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 Bye.